Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Caroline, and I am the office manager on the Tome team for Tome Society. And I'm here with James Preller, author of Blood Mountain, our August book of the month for Junior Tome It List. So, James, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Great. To start off with, if you will just tell us a little bit about yourself, the books you've written, your life, just a little bit of background info on you.
Yeah, well, I am in my kitchen right now, as you know, where we have a pandemic going on, but I'm in my kitchen, which is in upstate New York. So I'm about, when people hear New York, they often think of the big buildings and the city, but New York's a big state. And I'm about 3 hours north of New York City. If you go straight up the Hudson River, I'm kind of there, near Albany area. I live in a town called Del Mar. And, I was a kid. I wasn't a big reader as a kid. I don't have those memories. I'm the youngest of seven. I was playing sports and running around and doing all that. And then I kind of bought a journal, and around 10th grade, 9th, 10th grade, I really started, just putting down my thoughts on paper and writing in journal. I went to college, became an English major, and that's where the dream of, being a writer, doing something took hold. I published my first book in 1986. When I was 25 years old. So I've spent more than half my life as a published children's author. I've written picture books, chapter books, middle grade books, fiction, nonfiction. I kind of bounce around. I love doing picture books. It's so cool when an illustrator will do, kind of take my words and lift them to a whole new level. My newest book that just came out is called All Welcome Here, and it's a picture book of haiku, and it's illustrated by Mary Grand Pré. And I remember the phone call, I said to my editor, my editor called me and said, Jimmy, we're so excited. We've got a great illustrator do your book, Mary Grand Pré. And I was like, yeah, I don't know who that is. And she said, oh, you do? She did all the pictures in the Harry Potter books.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, I know her work, So all those, Hagrid, Hermione, and, I read those books to all my 3 children. And so it's amazing. So if you want to look up that book, it's all in haiku. It's a fun book. Probably best known for Jigsaw Jones, the Jigsaw Jones Mysteries, which are chapter books, kind of grades 2, 3 for the most part. Very benign. There are 42 of those books. And I've also written a bunch of middle grade books. Bystander, which is a bullying in a middle school, and that book has kind of won a lot of state awards and whatnot. The Courage Test, Father-son travel cross country along the Lewis and Clark Trail. So there's a little bit of American history there, nature, and if you've read Blood Mountain, you know that I enjoy the outdoors and that stuff. 6 Innings is another one. I'm a big baseball fan. I enjoy baseball, so it's about a championship Little League game. So I've just done a variety of books over the years. Yeah. And I'm so happy to be here talking about Blood Mountain today.
Good. Well, I did get to read Blood Mountain a couple weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. That's one of the best parts of my job, is getting to read. We read hundreds of books every year to choose our top 10 for middle school, which is the IT list. And that's one of my favorite parts, is getting to read a book and say, yes, this is good for our audience. So I really enjoyed Blood Mountain. I really liked the adventure and the nature and all that stuff. Was really, really good. We did get a bunch. Oh, yeah. We did get a lot of questions from our middle school chapters. So we'll jump right into those. Wyatt D. from Tallulah Falls Middle School wants to know how long it took you to write Blood Mountain.
This book took me a while. What happened with this book, Wyatt, was had the idea. I had the basic idea of like, okay, I'm gonna get some kids lost in the mountains in the wilderness, and I also had this idea that there would be a hermit, there would be somebody in that uh, in that realm in the wilderness, and we won't know his story, but I that was kind of the core. And then I started thinking, well, maybe a ranger, because I did like the idea of that there was a search. There's always a search, so I felt like I needed to convey that. And then the problem was, I realized, like, okay, so I have this idea, but I didn't have the knowledge really to write the book. I wasn't smart enough, and I had to do a lot of research. I wanted to be accurate. This is realistic fiction, and I had a lot to learn. And so I read a lot of books about survival in the wilderness, why people get lost, what do people do, what are the mistakes they do. So I read about that and talked to experts, and there's just so many little details that just reading and thinking and taking notes. And I called my editor and I said, Liz, I'm going to be late with this book. And she was like, that's fine, just take your time and get it right. And what I've come to believe is nobody cares when you pick up a book. Nobody cares whether the author was on time, whether the author met his deadline or not. What you care about is this book and how that experience is. So I felt like I was just going to take my time with that. So this book definitely took me over a year to write. Another thing that happened was, like, my editor early on, she said, Jimmy, what if there's a dog? How about if you put a dog in the story? And it was like, okay, I love dogs. I have a very super cool dog. I was happy to do it, but then I had to think about the dog, writing about a dog, and I didn't want to write about a dog as like a Disney character where the dog's the hero and thinks like a human being and everything. So I really wanted to have my dog be dog-like. So, one of the books, just for example, one of the books I read was Inside of a Dog by a behavioral scientist, and she studies dogs and really gave me that sense of like what it's like for a dog. And I wanted my dog to be dog-like. So all of that stuff took a lot of time before I was even writing a word. So
Yeah, I think we don't really think about all of that kind of back end stuff that goes into it. It's hard to just sit down and write a book about all the stuff that has so many details and stuff. You have to really
right. Well, that's
stuff.
why I've written some scary stories, and it's fun to just write about zombies or swamp monsters because you don't have to do any research. You're just kind of making it up.
Yeah. All right. So a couple students, Brendan P., Bailey C., Brooklyn R., Julia S., Caitlin M., and Josie C., all had some form of this question of where you got the idea or inspiration for Blood Mountain and why you decided to write a book about two lost kids.
I've always believed, and I say this to my own children, as follow your enthusiasms, follow the things you enjoy, the things that make your heart beat faster. If you're into building stuff, like, continue on with that. You may grow up and be an architect. If you're interested in nature, whatever it is. So I enjoy the outdoors, and I enjoy a fast-paced adventure story. And I don't think you can walk in the woods and not think about, I wonder if I'm lost here. I wonder if I'd survive. And you read these wilderness stories, and I think it's just kind of interesting to put characters in that situation. For the boy and a girl, brother and sister, I have my two youngest are Gavin and Maggie. They're close in age, so it made sense to me. And I think you kind of appeal to a wider variety of readers if you have a male and female protagonist. So that's kind of where that idea came from. And then, the other interesting idea, and I was talking to my nephew about this, of like, what if there's like a hermit or someone in the woods? And he told me about an article he had read about a guy who wandered into the wilderness for 27 years. And he had in Maine. And they came out with this. There was a great article. The article was the beginning of a book called Stranger in the Woods. And I read that. And I really began to get an instinct and inkling about this other character. So that's where it started. And then you just start thinking of different possibilities from there.
Okay. Now we have a lot of questions about the setting of the book. First, Callie T from Tallulah Falls wants to know if the events of the book happen in fall or winter.
It's late summer into early fall right then. And I was really stuck for a while. You know, I had written the courage test where I was very, very specific in my mind about where exactly those characters were, because they follow the Lewis and Clark Trail. So it was important to me to know exactly where they were. And for this one, it took me a while. I was like, well, where are they? Are they in the Smoky Mountains? And I needed the weather to be right. And I'm most familiar with the Adirondacks in upstate New York. And I like that. I kind of thought that setting would work. And in the end, I just kind of faked the location a little bit. I didn't get real, like, I don't have an idea that they were exactly here. I just kind of took an accumulation of plays, a composite place in a way. So that way any reader could imagine themselves in that spot, you know. So hopefully it resonates, you know, if you've been in the mountains of Georgia, I'm sure a lot of it felt familiar to you.
Yeah, we actually have a mountain here in Georgia called Blood Mountain. And so when we first got a copy of the book to read, we were like, oh my gosh, maybe it'll be set in Georgia, which is cool because that's where most of our chapters are. But yeah, you could definitely imagine. My family personally, we hike quite a bit, and I definitely could imagine, you know, being in that situation, and you just one wrong move kind of takes you off the trail, like it happened to the characters in the book. So that was good. And that kind of answers.
Also, I wanted those, you read about these like survivalists who know exactly what mushroom to eat, and they can, you know, build a lean-to with, you know, twigs and stuff. And I wanted my kids to be like normal kids who would just be like, uh-oh, you know. And so I, you know, very early on, I just had this idea that like their backpack, they have like some Twizzlers, you know, they're not really prepared for this.
Yeah.
So I wanted it from that perspective of not being the expert. Now the other guy, the hermit, you know, he does know how to survive. So I had to write from those perspectives.
Yeah. That answered. Chesney and Kerrigan from Tallulah Falls asked, why'd you pick Blood Mountain out of all the mountains in the world you could have chosen? So that kind of answers that for us.
Yeah, it just seemed like honestly, it just seemed like a cool name.
Yeah.
And in the Southwest, I think there's the Sangro de Cristo, you know, this idea of like the way the sun hits mountains, sometimes there's that red tinged. And I think there's a number of mountains in the world that are Blood Mountain. And it just seemed like, you know, exciting kind of name.
A great title. All right. Jed T wants to know if you have ever had an experience similar to the events in the book. Have you ever been lost while hiking?
Jed, I really haven't been lost while hiking, although I wouldn't put it past myself to have that happen because I am a little dreamy, and it would be very easy to, you know, I've missed the trail and kind of had to backtrack and figure it out. But no, I haven't had that. And in fact, you know, again, there's a lot of things that happen in that book that are really outside of my experience. Where I live, like, there are hunters, and I know people who hunt, and I have a best friend who's a bow hunter, and he goes out there every year. I'm not that guy. I don't even like fishing, you know, it just kind of, I like fishing until I catch a fish, and then it's just kind of gross.
Yeah.
But I had to write scenes, where I had the character John, I have him very early on, he has to field dress a squirrel and deal with that, and the mountain lion, and I had to read up about that. I went on YouTube and watched videos and learned enough that I could fake that I kind of knew this stuff. I had to learn enough so I could write it. But so a lot of times when you write, and this is actually good advice actually, is that they say write about what you know, and that makes a lot of sense. If you're a great soccer player, you can tell that story of the game, but at the same time, um, it's a fun and exciting to write about what you don't know, and you shouldn't feel limited by your own life, that you can only write about what's actually happened. The trick is you have to then learn about it, so you can set your book in a place you've never been. Now with Google Maps and all that stuff, you can put yourself there, you can really know it and describe it, and you just have to learn about it. And that's really the fun thing about being a writer, is you're exploring, you're kind of an explorer, and the learning is what keeps making it an interesting job.
Yeah, that's really good advice, especially with all the access that we have to information now. It's very easy to learn really anything that you want. We have it at our fingertips. It's really a privilege.
You're exactly right.
All right. So now about the narration of the book. Tate
Hmm.
T wants to know why you chose to tell the story in the 4 different perspectives.
You know, Caroline has this job. She's been a reader her whole life. And she was telling me before we did this interview, like, I get to read for my job. Another job that readers have is they end up working at publishing companies as editors, and helping. My editor, Liz, helps me craft my story, especially early on. We'll have conversations about, what is this book going to be about? What do we hope it will be about? And so and then once we kind of more or less agree on what we think the book is about, then it's like, okay, Jimmy, go off and do it. And I do. But early on, we talked about the different characters and using multiple points of view. And it just seemed to work for this story. I'd never done that before in any other book, but it just seemed, it wasn't just being tricky or clever. I wasn't trying to, go, oh, hey, look at me, I got 17 points of view. It just seemed to tell the story, and because the characters were so isolated, it was really the only way to do it. If I wanted to talk about Michaela, the ranger, who I love that character, um, you know she's alone. Like, there's no one else who can really, it has to be from her point of
Mhm.
view. So that was there. And another editor, actually, Jean, she had this idea that of breaking the story into days, day 1, day 2, day 3. So I kind of accepted that advice and moved forward. Sometimes editors have ideas and you're like, yeah, no, that's not what I want to do. And you kind of pick and choose, but it's a collaborative process. I'm responsible for every word on that page, but there's a lot of people who gave me good input early on.
All right. In the dedication page of the book, you dedicate it to your daughter, who you said you used as the inspiration for Grace's character. Can you tell us a little bit more about her?
Hmm. Well, I'm very biased. My daughter Maggie is 19 now, and she is awesome in every way. The thing about Grace in this book is that Grace is resilient, and she's strong and powerful and fierce and kind, and she just, and I thought about this character, and I thought of my own daughter Maggie, who I think embodies a lot of that. Maggie, very quickly, My wife, Lisa, is 6'1". She played college basketball. My daughter, Maggie, that was her dream. Maggie's a very good athlete. She gets it from her mother, not from me. And she, her dream was to play basketball, be a college basketball player. And she was good at it, and come sixth grade, she tore her ACL. It's ACL surgery. That's a very devastating knee injury for 6 months. She had that surgery, 6 months recovery, went back, made the soccer team. Seventh grade, was the only seventh grader on the JV soccer team. The first day of scrimmage, a live scrimmage, she blew out her other knee, ACL. Went through that experience. Anyway, went back to basketball the next year, blew out that knee again, a third ACL. And at that point, we said to her, Maggie, we can't, no more. You need to be able to have an adult life. You want to be able to carry your children. And so we kind of said no more. And a surgeon had said to her, well, what helps is you love sports, you love being on a team, try crew. And crew is rowing. And the thing with rowing is you're sitting in a boat, your knee is stable, you're not going to have people crashing into you. So she went and did crew, and anyway ended up getting a scholarship in college, and now goes to Brown University, Ivy League school, because she's amazing in that regard.
She didn't give up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So when and you do that a lot. I do that a lot. I think writers do that a lot, where you take bits and pieces of people. People go, "Oh, is that Maggie?" It's like, well, it's not Maggie, but there's an element of Maggie in there. There's an element of me in there. There's someone you meet, and you take a little piece of them, and they help you imagine those characters more vividly.
Yeah, that's cool. So Grace's little brother Carter is very brave throughout the book, especially I have a foster son that's kind of close to his age, so I think he's really brave for his age. And a lot of our readers are around his age also. So I think they can really relate, like put themselves in his shoes and think about, well, what would I do if me and my sister, or me and my sibling were lost? So I really enjoyed his character. And the question is, what made you decide to put a younger brother in the book instead of an older brother or a younger sister or a friend or whatever? What did you decide on the sibling relationship?
I don't know that I had like a real profound plan, I don't know. I felt like, to me, like Grace is the lead character, and she's older and smarter. But I think I'm the youngest of 7 children. I had 2 older sisters and 4 older brothers. So maybe I was drawing on that. Like, I know what it feels like, like I had to beat every member in my family at ping pong. I was, one by one, I took them down, like, I think when you're the youngest, you think like that. And I think he's, he competes with his sister, even though I don't think he's quite as capable as Grace is yet. And, in terms of his bravery, kids are amazing. We see it. He doesn't have a choice. And I think maybe if he had a choice, he might have acted differently, but he really didn't have any choice. And he rose to the occasion, and and he had the courage and the wherewithal to do that. But at the same time, there was really no other option for him. So he just rose to the occasion. And I think we see that in the world of, like, you hear stories of like the 5-year-old girl who calls 911 when her father has a heart attack or something, like when we're faced with a situation, it's really interesting how we can respond. My oldest son, Nicholas, is 27 now. He lives in New York. He's healthy and strong, but he is a 2-time cancer survivor. So when he was 2 years old, he got cancer. 10 years old, he got cancer. And, when you're faced with that, you you can do incredible things. And I think you hear me, I get choked up even
Mm.
years later. Um, but when a kid is faced with something, it's profound and deep what they can do. So I really kind of get uncomfortable when like, oh yeah, a kid couldn't do this. A kid doesn't think like that. And I'm like, I think they do, and I think they can.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that's
I think there's a good lesson in there too, for especially since, like I said, our readers are right around his age, to not count yourself out and not underestimate yourself and what you're capable of. Um, so it kind of already answered the next question. David P wanted to know about John, why you chose to put him in the book and where you got inspiration from, but you told us about the article about the man in the woods. In the book, John risks a lot to save Carter. So
Mhm.
can you tell us more about his thought process during the times he decides to save Carter in the bog and then from the mountain lion?
John in a lot of ways was a very challenging character to write for me. I mean, and to back up, I worked very closely with a ranger on this book. I contacted the Department of Environmental Conservation, who then put me in touch with a ranger named Megan McCone, and I talked to her a lot, and her job is to, walk the trails and work in the national parks. Every ranger, by the way, goes through police training and
Hmm.
is, they're all police officers and they have a gun, they have sidearms, and so I'm proud of how my character Michaela conducts herself.
Mm.
She's a great cop, but so so I think talking to her and others, there are those people who like have post-traumatic stress disorder or just feel like this world is too much for them and they back away and need that. I have a I have a brother who had mental illness who actually left his house and moved into the woods for a while. So I think I'd always had that kernel of an idea in my heart. This was like 30
Mhm.
years ago, and went down to Virginia to see my brother John, and he was like in the woods, but it's sort of a self-medicating idea. And I think John is that, it's not that John's a bad person. It's not that he's he doesn't wish ill on anyone. He's just really trying to just keep it together in the best
Mm.
way he can and not hurt anyone and not do and just the buzz and the vibration of the city and that kind of life like is not for him. So I think there's basic goodness in him. And when he sees this kid, even though he knows it maybe imperils his isolation by helping Carter, he really couldn't sit back and allow that kid to be in danger. So his basic goodness, when push come to shove, kind of came forward. And so I'm sympathetic to John, that character, and as much as he wants to be alone, he he can't avoid doing the right thing.
Mm. Eleanor A. from Tallulah Falls School would like to know if there's anything that you want to change or wish you would have written differently about any of the characters.
Oh, Eleanor. I'm pretty happy with this book, to be honest. And because I've written a lot of books. I've written more than 80 books in my life, and they're not all perfect, and I am not perfect. And sometimes when I read passages out loud, I'll I'll go, oh, there's so many adjectives, or there'll be things about my own writing that bother me. So that said, I, I've learned to accept like this is the book. It's the best I could do at the time. There's a lot in here I can be proud of, and I sort of don't go back and try to relive the book. It's done. I did the best I can. I've moved on. Some books I like more than others. I really do like Blood Mountain a lot. There's a lot in there that really comes from my heart. So I know I'm not perfect. I'm sure that's not perfect, but I'm okay with
That's good life advice in general. Do the best job
it.
you can at the time and don't go back and try to pick it apart. That's good. Um, TJ from Tallulah Falls once says it's really interesting how you wrote this book almost like a poem. Why did you write the book in this style?
Oh, well, thank you, TJ. I think thank you. Yeah, and I think it's not a poem, and but I think you're responding to like some of the lyrical quality of the writing, and the images and metaphors and whatnot. And I really my first love as a writer was poetry. I love beautiful writing. I love like clarity and the right word. And I quickly realized like, well, you can't make any money writing poetry. That was, there's just no money in that at all. And I kind of moved away from poetry. Interestingly, my last book is haiku, but I think so that poetry has taught me how to write. I think I was writing my own poems. I learned those lessons, and that's just hardwired in my writing. And this subject matter of nature lent itself to that kind of writing for me. Other books I've written are maybe a little more hard-edged and less, poetic, if you will. But this one, it just kind of came out that way. That was the voice of the book.
Yeah, a lot of it was very like I said, the imagery. It was really helped you picture it in your mind. It was okay. Several students, HG, Elena E, Cohen E, and Jake O, want to know if there will be a sequel or more books with some of the characters from Blood Mountain.
Um, right now, there are no plans for a sequel. I think sometimes that stuff is driven by sales a little bit. Like, if everyone uh, you know, is buying the book and loves the book, then sometimes the publisher's like, let's do a sequel. Right now, I don't have any plans for that. I did feel I came away with a lot of a sense that I really liked writing. I liked that setting. And I felt like, particularly working with the ranger, it's like there could be a lot of interesting situations that could take place in the wilderness. And so I could see taking what I learned from that book and applying it to a new story. I don't know if I need Grace and Carter to be lost again, but stranger things have happened. I wrote a book, Bystander, 10 years ago, and I more than any other book, that's a book where everyone asked me for a sequel. And I said, no, 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 I'm not interested, blah, blah, blah. And I just wrote one. And that comes out next year. It's called Upstander. And I kind of went back and told that. I revisited some of those characters again. So you never know.
All right, and along those same lines, Mitchell M and Cohen E want to know if you think Blood Mountain would make a good book to movie adaptation.
I think so. The way it works is that I write books. That's where my skill set is. I don't know how to make movies. I don't have that talent or that know-how. But there are people in the film industry who have readers, who read books, and who are always looking for ideas. The world needs ideas. So there's people who read books, and they will then what's called option a book for the rights to make a movie. So they'll give you some money um, and then possibly make a movie out of your book. That's not in my control. I kind of can't worry about that. But so would I love it to be? I think it could be a fun, I think it's a book with adventure and suspense, and it kind of is a gripping story, and I do think it could lend itself to a movie if someone wants to make it. Sure, show me the money. I'll take it. Be happy. It would be a thrill. The other thing about movies, though, is, and we talked about with the language, that you want a reader to see in the back of their mind, what's happening in the story. So when they read a book, um, they can really vividly imagine what's going on. So in a way, you're trying to write for the movie in the back of someone's skull.
Mhm.
So you use your language and your storytelling skills to help that movie projector start running in the reader's mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would make a good movie too. And these students had asked was, would you ever make a movie from your book? And I knew, I said, so I'm glad you gave the explanation of how it kind of works.
Yeah,
That you don't really get to say, okay, now let's make this a movie. That they have to
I
come to you.
wish.
So
Yes.
yeah. Um, all right. So Cohen E has a couple fun questions. Um, he would like to know, who is your personal favorite author to read?
Oh, this is Colin. Did you say his
Cohen.
Cohen? Cohen, I am a book lover and a reader, and I'm always reading something by somebody, and I read widely. I read all different kinds of things. So I can't say that I have a favorite. I have a number of favorites. I love Raymond Chandler wrote detective mysteries, and I really was inspired by him, and he helped me um, write and think about writing my Jigsaw Jones series. I kind of was directly inspired by him. Um, but one writer that I've gone back to over and over again in my life is Kurt Vonnegut. And Kurt Vonnegut's an American writer. He's passed away, but he writes these fun, lively, edgy kind of stories. Slaughterhouse-Five, Cat's Cradle, and whatnot. But one of the things he wrote a thing called Rules for Writers. He was also an educator and a college teacher late in his career. It's a good way for writers to make extra money. And he wrote these rules for writers. And he had one rule, and I have it. I wrote it down here. And they had that. His rule number 8, I think it was: no matter how sweet and innocent your leading characters, make awful things happen to them in order that the reader may see what they are made of. And I didn't read that and then write Blood Mountain. But when I came across that quote, I was like, I think that's great advice, and it's that idea of, you put your character in a situation, and it doesn't matter what that situation is, that, okay, they're lost in a mountain, or their best friend moved away, or they're in a new school, or they blow out their knee, or you just have something happen to that character. And as readers, that's when we really find out what's inside this character. What have they got? Um, so it was really fun to do that in this book, and it's also fun to think of, like, what awful things can I do? Like, what can I do to these kids? Bugs are horrible. Oh, I could have someone fall. A bear would be good. And you just start thinking of these terrible things you can do to your character, not because you're a sick, twisted person, although maybe that helps, but but more just like, that will be the test. And most books that we read, most movies that we see, are as a character, and we give that character an obstacle, and we watch that character overcome that obstacle. And in good books and good movies, it's usually a series of obstacles. It's a series of problems. The character wants to get to a goal, and then we put things in front of them. So that's good writing advice from Kurt Vonnegut Jr., one of my favorite writers, and you really do see it in Blood Mountain.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Cohen's other question is, what is your favorite, I guess, genre, or I don't know if middle grades versus picture books are necessarily a different genre, but what's your favorite type of book to write?
I keep coming back to realistic fiction for the most part. I'm a realistic fiction person. I like that closely observed human interaction. I like a family sitting around the dinner table. It's not the most exciting thing, but I like that as a reader. I like
Mhm.
that as a writer. At the same time, I bounce around personally as a writer. I like new challenges. I like, this idea. Once you have an idea of like, I don't know if I can do that. I've never done that before. That feeling of fear uh, I've learned to listen to that and go toward it. That thing that you're not, "Oh, I don't know if I should try out for the play. It's a little scary," and go there, because that's make you feel most alive and most challenged, and something's calling you for that. So in that regard, I like writing in different genres. I've never written I've never published a true sci-fi story of like set on a different planet.
Mhm.
And I think because I've never done it, I kind of feel like I'd like to try to do that someday. I've never written a book in verse. I think I'd like to try that too. But I'll always go back to realistic fiction, I think. That's kind of my core comfort zone.
That's my favorite genre to read for sure. All right. So a lot of our chapters like to use the It List books for a like, try, why book recommendations. So um, they'll, especially the chapter advisors will say, okay, if you liked Blood Mountain, you should try
Hmm.
this book because it has this, this, and this.
Right.
So I know I probably should have given you this question ahead of time, but do you have any like, try, why recommendations for fans of Blood Mountain?
um, but the one book that comes to mind quickly, and it was kind of an older classic that I'm not sure how many people are reading it now, but was Hatchet by Gary Paulson. And that's a book where, again, a kid is dropped into a wilderness situation, and we watch him struggle with the elements and try to survive. And it's sort of like, I don't know if you watch the show Survivor. I have kind of a soft spot for Survivor, even though like some seasons are better than others. But I like that show, and I think the thing about that show, one of the aspects of that show, is you can't help but go, I wonder how I'd do, if they'd vote me
Mhm.
off the first week, or if I'd be smarter, how badly would I lie? How bad, like, and you just immediately place yourself in that situation. And so watch Survivor, read Hatchet. Gary Hobbs is another writer. I think I got his name right, who's written some wilderness stuff. So if you like nature and you like that kind of stuff, um, I continue on along that. But again, I really think as readers, we need to read outside our comfort zone too, and read things that we don't think we would like, or we don't not even think we would like. We don't normally read in that area. So you read a biography, or you read, you just read widely and differently. And what's the worst thing can happen after 100 pages?
Yeah, I think
So.
that's a good advice. All right. Another one that I didn't prepare you for, but uh, we want to eventually put together like an It List playlist. Um, so, are there any songs that come to your mind that would be like on the soundtrack of Blood Mountain?
Oh, I am a music lover, big time. Um, I actually have written other books where I really have had that sense of a soundtrack, and I've done that. Like I've even made up playlists for other books that I've done.
Mhm.
But Blood Mountain I never did. I think lyric heavy wouldn't have worked. So I'm kind of hearing more wooden music, as we as call it, like more like acoustic and
Mhm.
cinematic kind of music. But there's a great guitarist named William Tyler. Uh, he's just amazing, and if you ever want to check him out, but he writes these long, 8-minute uh, acoustic guitar based songs, but he also uses electronics too. And I could see certain scenes working for that. The other thing that happens in movies, if you notice, is different characters will have different types of music.
Mhm.
So in our movie, in this great movie where I become a millionaire, Michaela, who's from Brooklyn, New York, and a city kid and stuff. And she's singing Amazing Grace at one point and references, 60s soul music that she grew up with her parents listening to. I would see her sounds being different, so when you saw her hiking, maybe well, I don't think she would hike with headphones on, but maybe different music would play for her, and each character would have their signature sounds. So I'd have to give it more thought.
Yeah. Well, good. I'll put William Tyler on our list to check out for
Yeah,
sure.
I'll send you a song.
Good. Well, that's all the questions that I have. I know you mentioned your new book that just came out. If you'll tell us the title of that one again.
Yeah, it's just a picture book, so I'm sure
Mhm.
for you guys, maybe you have a younger brother or sister. It's called All Welcome Here. And the new book that is the sequel to Bystander, that's coming out next year, is called Upstander. And just quickly on that one is that when everyone asks me about sequel, I was like, I'm good. I feel like this. And when you think of a sequel, it's like, okay, the story went here, it ended here. So the sequel is what happens next. And then I thought, well, what if I did a prequel, but then I told some of the events that happened in the book from a different perspective. So I focus on a different character, really tell Mary's story. She's got a whole other story going on. But we revisit a couple of key scenes from Bystander from her perspective, and then I go on beyond that. So it just made me think, I think when I thought of twisting it that way, it gave me permission to kind of revisit that book and do my own version of a sequel. It wasn't so much like I'm going to take these characters and just continue following them. It wasn't writing a longer book. I was writing a larger book.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of like a companion
Yeah.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Well, great. Well, thank you so much. Anything else you want to share with us?
Caroline, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you, the members of the Tome Society, for having me, for reading my book, and I know that you don't do it for me. You're doing it uh, for the students out there, and for the love of literacy and the love of books. And I'm glad to be a part of that. It means so much to have a book be recognized and read. Sometimes you put out a book and the world kind of shrugs and looks the other way. And it's just nice to, I love this book, and I really appreciate you giving it some time. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who read it and took a look at it. And I hope you liked it.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a perfect addition for our middle school IT list, so we're happy to have it. And we have a saying that once an IT list author, always an IT list author. We have a big conference every year that unfortunately we had to cancel this past year in March, and that's why we're doing these interviews now. We're kind of we call it TomeCon, and it's going to be
Right.
TomeCon all year long. because we're likely not going to be able to have 3,000 people in one space
No.
even next year. So, but we would definitely look forward to having you at any future in-person TomeCon. So we'll keep you in the loop for that also. But
Please do. Please
yeah,
do. I would love to attend. It would be great.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for answering all of our students' questions. I know they'll be really excited to hear their names and hear you answering them. So that'll be great. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, guys. And have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right.